Hello. So I had a few folks express interest about the Mario Party video I did a while back, specifically in regard to its source code. But I didn't quite feel like that was up to my own standards, and I also had an urge to redo things from scratch and do things a bit differently. So that's kind of what this video is going to be about. Long term, the plan is not to recreate Mario Party though, at least not in its entirety. Rather, I'm just kind of using it as a template or a checklist for all the basic systems that I want to add for a different game idea, which I'll talk about later. But that's enough intro stuff. Let's get into how I actually went about making Mario Party in Godot. So this time around, I went about making things a bit more simply. So instead of having things be on paths, everything is just spaces, going to other spaces. So every space has an array of next spaces. So this one only has one, it's going to this red space here. But this red space has two, it's going to this bank space and the blue space, which this is the bank space, this is the blue space. And if I run the game itself, you can see that I can display those arrows there, and that'll show which direction it's going in. But this time, I wanted to do things a bit differently with regards to how the space logic is composed. So instead of having each space be its own individual script, there's just one space script, and then events can be added to a space, which that space will then trigger those events for. So you can see here in the space script, we say, when we land on the space, we do all of the individual land events for the events that are children of the space, and then similarly for pass events, we do the same thing. We just do pass events for those spaces. So by breaking those up into landing versus passing, we can, do different stuff for each. So the cool thing about this, though, is actually that you can do multiple events per space. In fact, as many as you want. So, like for example, I have one here. So this space here is a red space, a star space, and a shop space, which makes no sense, but you can do it. So if I go into space, the first thing that happens is a star. I'll say no to buying a star, then buy a star. And then, immediately after that, now we're doing a shop. I can buy stuff. I'll say no. And then there's no effects right now, but this is I lost 3 coins, so that was the red space that happened after those first 2. So it's very, very customizable and very easily extensible. You can do anything you want for each space. So that's kind of the main cool thing about it, I think. There's a lot of room there for interesting game design, I think. And in fact, one thing you could easily do with this is make the hex system from the later Mario Party games. So you could, add event for, the various hex events that happen in, I think it's Mario Party 6 was the first time they did that. Could be wrong. So yeah, I can show another example here. So this is the bank event. So as you'd expect for a bank, there's a toll, usually 5 coins. So you can say, whenever an actor passes this event, we are going to take the toll from their money and then remove that amount from their inventory and then add that amount to the total amount we've taken for the bank. And then obviously when we land on the bank, the player gets all the money, so we add the total and then we set it back to 0. So it can be as simple as just adding a couple different functions for landing and passing, and then you have a whole new event. So here's the star space event. So it's a bit more complicated because we have to involve some menuing. And then for that, I'm using the plugin called Dialogue Manager, which I highly recommend. It makes it so much easier to do dialogue stuff. So you can see that if I pass or land, do basically the same code. And then we go into this dialogue balloon, which I can show here. So we can say, are you going to buy a star? We can say yes or no, and then if it confirm, it'll run this buy function on that event, which then moves the price for our coins and then adds a star to our inventory. So again, very, very simple. And then, the shop is similar to that. It's just some other logic. Where is it? Shop. We just, using Dialogue Manager is very, very fancy, like logic stuff. You can do quite a lot. So yeah, that's those are all the events that I've made so far. Very, very basic stuff. And then I guess one more thing I can talk about is that under the hood, I'm using an A-Star 3D network to kind of connect spaces together. It isn't really used too much so far, but I'll just go ahead and show how I went about doing it. And the reason I think this is a good idea is because if you wanted to add like an AI to the game, you'd want them to know, what spaces they're going to pass, what spaces they're going to land on, and getting those paths and spaces would be much easier if you had a network, because all of that logic can be kind of borrowed from it. So that's the reasoning for that. So basically, whenever we, whenever the board initializes, we're going to set up our A-star network, and then for each space, we're going to add a point to our network, and then for each of the next space for that space, so these are all the different spaces we can go to. So for this one, there's only one, but for this one, there's two. For each of those, we connect those points together, and then they're single directional, so they don't go both ways. You probably could have it go both ways, but just for simplicity, I'm leaving that as an option for later. So yeah, I mean, that's how that works basically. And then I did implement one function that'll give you an array of all possible paths from a given start point, and then also a given amount of steps you can take. So that would be what you need essentially for an AI to know. If I go this way and then that way and then this way, and then I'll land here. But that's one possible option. That's basically a requirement if you want to have any sort of smart AI in a game. But for now, I don't even use this. It's just there for later. But yeah, that's the basics of what I've got here. The goal was just to, make some bare bones logic of all the basic systems for moving around on a Mario Party board. And I think I've pretty much accomplished that. Going forward, my plan is theoretically to make a different game entirely using this kind of as like a framework. I think particularly just the fact that you can have multiple events per space. There's something there, I think, that can make it interesting. But I won't go too much into that. I'll do that for a different video in the future. So the code for this is all going to be on Codeberg. I will say that I probably will not be updating it very much, if at all. But it's there if you want to look at it, and you can do whatever you want with it. And yeah, feel free to do whatever you want. Thanks for watching.